to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. It's been a few months since our last recording. During that time, I've begun classes in animation and visual effects. On one hand, that means that videos for the Kemetic How-To Guide might take a little longer to get uploaded, but the positive end of that is you'll hopefully start seeing some with special effects. Today's video is going to be about Egyptian music, ancient Egyptian, modern, and how that relates to Kemetic practice. The best book that you can get on that subject is Music and Musicians in Ancient Egypt by Lisa Manish. It can be kind of difficult to find on Amazon. The first few times I looked for it, it wasn't available, so I just had to put it on my wish list and it came up. But if you can get it, it's a great book because it talks about the different kinds of instruments, bits of songs that they've found, a little bit about modern instruments, and that chapter is really interesting because it gives you a lot of things that you can go and search on Google. You learn a lot of neat things that way. The drawback is, okay, it's kind of funny, you know, reading a book about music, there's only so much that you can get about, you know, something just reading it when music is all about sound. And that's the thing. We don't know exactly what Egyptian music back then sounded like because obviously there were no recordings then, and also because the Egyptians didn't have sheet music. If any of you have ever had to learn to read sheet music and reading scales, and every good boy does fine, they didn't have that back then. There wasn't any system of notation that we know of, anyway. Some people have made some very good guesses by looking at instruments pictured on tomb paintings and figured out, okay, how far apart were the strings, how many strings were they, how many notes might that have given you, and Dr. Manish talks about that in her book. Another reason why we aren't 100% sure on what Egyptian music sounded like, I have to specify ancient Egyptian music, is because a lot of the instruments that we found, they're kind of fragmentary. With flutes especially, we don't know what kind of end pieces they have. This is a reed flute that I picked up at a powwow, and this is only one type of reed. You've got end-blown flutes, you've got ones with reeds like this. There's several different kinds, but we haven't found intact reeds for any ancient flutes, so we don't know exactly how they made them. But, and that's why I specified ancient Egyptian music versus modern. Modern Middle Eastern music is one of our best frames of reference for what ancient music would have sounded like. And an interesting CD, if you can get a copy of it, I recommend it. This is The Music of Upper and Lower Egypt. I got it used on Amazon. The story behind this recording is the Grateful Dead, back in, I think it was the 70s, they were touring the world and they went to Egypt, and lots of funky stuff must have happened there because some of their roadies went on to write some really strange books about shamanic voyages in Egypt and things like that. Well, one of the members of the Grateful Dead noticed some of the folk music and said, this is really neat, we need to record this before it disappears. And so there are recordings going all the way from southern Egypt going into Nubia, that's, you know, the bottom end of the country, all the way up to Alexandria. And it's really interesting to see the differences the further up they go. And if you remember my video that I did of a tour of different shrines, a piece of music from this disc is actually in that video. As far as more educated guesses about Egyptian music, there's 3 different CDs that I've picked up, and I will go through them. This first one here is the music of the ancient Sumerians, Egyptians, and Greeks, and it's by a group called Ensemble de Organographia. That's kind of a tough one. This one, there's only about 3 or 4 tracks towards the end that are actually Egyptian. There's also a lot of Greek and Hurrian, which is from Canaan, I believe. If you happen to be interested in Canaanite reconstruction religion, also known as Natib Kaddish, this might be an interesting CD for you, because this is music that was reconstructed from hymns from the ancient Hurrians. And actually one of those is also on my Shrine Tour video, because they use some similar instruments. There's a few things that use sistrums, and it happened to fit that particular video very well. The next one is Ankh, The Sound of Ancient Egypt by Michael Atherton. And this one was composed for a museum tour that was done in Sydney, Australia. And whereas the folks in Ensemble de Organographia actually built instruments as recreations of ancient ones, the musicians here went looking for various ethnic instruments from different parts of the world that sounded very close to, or were constructed very similar to, ancient Egyptian instruments. The last one is Ancient Egypt, a tribute composed by and performed by Ali Jihad Raisi. He's a Lebanese artist, and this one was actually done for the Tut exhibit that toured in the 1970s. And the funny thing is, with all of these CDs, they're on kind of a, I'd put them on sort of a scale of listenability. With, if I can get the disc, music of the ancient Sumerians, Egyptians, and Greeks is very interesting to listen to, and it's obvious that they were very careful with what they reconstructed. They weren't trying to, interpolate a lot of things and freelance it. They, were trying to be, as authentic as you can get, I guess. And the ironic thing is, ancient music sounds a little, or what we've come up with so far, will probably sound a little weird to most ears. Middle range would be Ankh, The Sound of Ancient Egypt. There's a few tracks on here that are pretty listenable, but there's others that just kind of get weird. And the female vocalist that they have for a handful of tracks, where they're trying to do hymns, sounds a little too Western. But it's still a good CD. It's worth getting, and there are a lot of tracks that I can see using in future videos, for shrine tours, and stuff like that. The most listenable one is actually Ancient Egypt. The funny thing is, it's technically not that authentic because it's more produced, and especially if you're a child of the 80s, you'll understand what it means to have produced music, because that's something they complained about back then, was everything was produced. What that means is, when it was recorded, they did a lot of things to it. There was some overdubbing, and there's other things they do to balance out particular instruments, things that are typically done in the music that we listen to now. You think of any popular music, there's a lot of work that's done to it in the studio. Whereas back then, we didn't have recording studios and things like that, so things sounded a little more of probably what we would consider raw. And if you think about it, just what did it sound like in ancient times? It was probably a lot quieter, a very different place. Think about it, they didn't have heavy machinery, aircraft, all the things that are 100 decibels or above. They didn't have that, and so they also weren't slowly killing their hearing with earphones, or headphones. So a lot of things that we have to tweak with a microphone and with settings in a recording software, they were used to hearing it raw. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind, if you're like me, you're interested in learning about music from that part of the world, belly dance music it's a form of Middle Eastern music, but it's not the only kind there is. And I have a couple of belly dance CDs as well. There are so many of them out there. I'm not even going to mention specific ones. The two that I picked up may not even be the best ones out there. But the type of music, there's a lot of percussion used. It's meant to keep a rhythm that complements the dancing, but there's a whole lot of other instruments that you don't see, or you don't hear them spotlighted as much in belly dance. Now, if you want to experiment with playing an instrument from that part of the world, I recommend doing that. It's a lot of fun, and especially because if you're trying to do something, reconstructionist, you don't have to worry about, hitting the right notes. There are no notes recorded, to worry about missing. It is very liberating in that sense. If you aren't classically trained in music, you can still have a good time. Something that I picked up over the summer, and anybody, if you can find a music store near you, especially a Guitar Center, that's where I got this one, or online. This is a type of drum. Okay, yeah, see, it's called a darbuka, also called a doumbek. And this is a little one. I showed it to a Lebanese friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, you got a baby one," because these can go from this small one here, which was about $30, to ones that are much bigger and much more expensive. And if you want to learn how to play it, there is a guy on YouTube who has an excellent series of videos on how to play darbuka. So just search darbuka, Darbuka, lesson 1, and the guy's name is Karol Wilkaszewski, I think. I'll put it up, but you'll know when you've got them. They're great videos. That's how I taught myself to play, and it's a fun little drum because you've got a couple of different notes that you can do, and he explains how to play and how to get the particular notes. There's one technique that's called split hand. It's very difficult. I can't pull it off yet. But the fun thing about this is you could take this to a drum circle if there's an open circle in your area, and there are people that do drumming. You can pick up one of these and you can bring it along, and everybody have a good time. On another pagan friend of mine in the area, she went and picked one up. She told me about this one. The only thing is, this is not the same as the little African drums that are called djembes. Those you use more of a flat hand technique on, but you notice if you do the darbuka like that, you're not going to get much sound. You have to kind of tap it with the ends of your fingers, and it's meant to resonate out of this back end. But lots of fun, very inexpensive. Try it out. Another kind of instrument, and I picked this up. You may not be able to find something like this unless you just hit, a really eclectic novelty shop like the one I hit in New Orleans. But this harp is, again, it doesn't sound like the kind of thing we're used to hearing, but this is very similar, the way it's built, to harps that would have been used in ancient times. So little things like that, or the kinds of flutes that you can pick up at a powwow or whatever, would be great things to try if you want to experiment. And again, nobody can tell you you're out of tune, because what was proper tune back then. We have some ideas, so if it sounds bad, then keep working on it. But it's not like taking piano lessons, or that kind of thing, which is very liberating. And if you're like me, your Egyptian practice, it can inspire you to try new things. People try to take up belly dancing, or making jewelry, all sorts of things, and making music is just one of the many things that you could try, as part of your practice. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with is a little bit of music that I mixed on a program that I actually bought it so I could do some voiceover work, but it has some great techniques for recording instruments as well. So I'll put those on. Hopefully they're listenable. So for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon wishing you Senebti.